Welcome back to another episode of Debt Collection 101. We have a very hot topic today, and we've never done an episode on this. So I'm Ashley with Arbite. We have a first-time Arbite employee on the call as well. We have Brittany, our customer success manager, and we have our amazing guests that we've had before. We are so thankful that you guys are here. We have Joann Needleman and Leslie Bender from Clark Hill Law, and we will be talking about the future of credit reporting today. So just to start off, just everyone knows who you guys are, but in case someone watching does not, if you guys can just give yourself an introduction, let us know a little bit about you guys, and we'll go from there.
Super. Well, thank you, Ashley and Emily and Brittany and the whole Arbite team for inviting us again. We just enjoy coming on and talking to you guys. It's just a pleasure. My name is Joann Needleman. I am with Clark Hill, and I lead our Consumer Financial Services Regulatory and Compliance Practice Group, and I'm based in Philadelphia.
And I'm Leslie Bender, and it is my privilege to be part of Joann Needleman's team at Clark Hill, although I am in our DC office. And I have also been privileged recently to work on behalf of the industry to do some discussions with one of the states that is adopting some of these credit reporting and medical debt laws. And it is a hot topic, and we applaud Arbite for picking up this topic and making it available. And we really are interested. We are intensely watching this.
Yep.
Awesome.
Right. So let's just kind of jump into it. We'll start off with the current state. What's the current state of compliant credit reporting? Leslie, if you kind of want to start.
Sure. Theoretically, today, there are a few things that have happened with credit reporting. All of the major state AGs and all of the consumer reporting agencies that Joann and I'll call CRAs for convenience, because we don't have 5 hours to talk today.
Mm-hmm.
They got together a number of years ago, and they came up with a compact that they thought would reduce errors and reduce consumer frustration with items they find on their credit reports. So today, any collection agency that chooses to credit report is called a data furnisher. They have a never-ending duty to make sure that everything they report is accurate and has integrity. So that would probably require look-sees twice in the life cycle of a collections account. First, when they get the account, and then later, if they get a dispute or an inquiry from a consumer or an authorized third party, they may also have to take a look again and conduct what's called a reasonable investigation. So today, the duty, if you're going to be a data furnisher, is to make sure everything you report is accurate and has integrity. That means that you have to review placements when they come in, look for errors, look for patterns, look for trends. And I know Joann loves to talk about the importance of tracking and trending, so I won't take the wind out of her sails. But those front end processes must be in place. This is the way it looks today. Joann, I know, take it away about what happens with the disputes and the inquiries on the second look-see.
Yeah. Well, I think the state in play today is this whole issue of disputes. The CFPB has reported in the last year the #1 complaint that they receive on their consumer complaint portal is about credit reporting, and most of it has to do with disputes. And that is the most difficult and challenging part of the credit reporting process, because unfortunately, debt collectors are constrained by a couple different types of processes that are not perfect, unfortunately. The dispute process that happens if you look on your credit report and want to contact a credit reporting agency and say, oh, Experian, I don't understand this medical bill or this whatever bill is, and then you contact them, and then the credit reporting agency contact the data furnisher, is a difficult process. It is all automated, which is good, but it doesn't leave a lot of room for explanation. You have to fit into a category. Now, there are lots of categories, but saying it's not mine can mean a lot of different things. So it's been a really hard process for consumers to communicate their disputes to the credit reporting agencies and then to the data furnishers, and then for the data furnishers to respond back because they're not given enough information. And that always has been a problem in the system. Add that to what Leslie was talking about several years ago, this whole idea of doing a direct dispute, that the process of having to navigate your disputes both through the CRA and then to the data furnisher was complicated. So under Reg V, as in victory, they allow consumers to directly contact a data furnisher. And again, that makes it very difficult because there is no type of process or formalized process about how to do that and what to say. And so it has created, in my opinion, a lot of miscommunication between data furnishers and consumers about what is wrong with their credit report. And so that has resulted in a lot of dissatisfaction amongst consumers about how they want items in their credit report changed. And that has just boiled over in the last couple of years, and it really has come to a head, I got to say, in the last 12 months, and even in the last week. I mean, it has been one thing after another about credit reporting, and in particular, and we'll talk about this today, is medical.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, Joann, there's an important point. I know you talked about this in some of your podcasts. Back in October, I want to say, of 2020, the Wall Street Journal and a number of business journals talked about how people's credit scores aren't really meaningful anymore because consumers in the United States receive these stimulus checks. And as we might have expected, they use them to pay down a lot of their bills to improve their financial circumstances, which was fantastic. And so that boosted their credit scores, ironically. Now what people are saying, and we have no basis necessarily for knowing, because as Joann points out in her podcast, we don't know how the Vantage score or the FICO scores are calculated. We don't know how they weight debts. We don't know how they weight collection matters. You know, that's their sort of recipe for their Heinz 57 sauce. And so here we are, you know, maybe 18 months later from that flurry of concern about credit scores. And now people are sort of leading to an inference about whether debt collectors should credit report at all. And maybe medical is just emblematic. And these supervisory highlights have pointed out how important it is to have internal processes if you're a collection agency that data furnishes. And those internal processes really have to be aware of any weird things, unexpected things, you know, unusual things. And I think the thing that has really been devastating is this absence of controls about frivolous and duplicative disputes. You know, somebody took the time to dispute a trade line. What are the processes a collection agency has to quickly identify duplicate disputes and frivolous disputes so that they don't skew your numbers? If you're going to continue data furnishing, now that we're all under the microscope, if we're collection agencies that data furnish, it's not something for sissies. Credit reporting is not for sissies.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it sounds like it was just like something everyone did, or, you know, a few like agencies did and like didn't even think twice about it. And now it sounds like it's something that agencies are gonna have to have processes for and like really look into just credit reporting in general, do's and don'ts, and those weird things that you were talking about.
Yeah, I think you're absolutely right, Ashley. And I think consumers have a misunderstanding that if you're in collections, you've been credit reported, as though there's some automatic way that happens.
Yeah.
So yet we can't overshadow and say, oh, we're not credit reporting, because even saying the words credit reporting can strike terror in somebody's heart thinking, oh my God, if I don't pay this bill. And that's one of the points that the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau has been making, is that there are some things that are inherently coercive in their view, which are scary words to us compliance attorneys, that it's inherently coercive to even talk about your credit or credit reporting.
Yeah.
And I think that that's something we have to be mindful about also, Ashley.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like I've heard like before where it's just like, if you do, like, a consumer automatically thinks that it is going to hinder their credit score. Like on the phones, they say like, is this going to affect my credit? So it is something that's just like, people do think that collection agencies just automatically do this and it will affect their credit.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good point.
All right. So we didn't really touch on this topic, but I know before we started doing our episode, we kind of got into the medical debt. So the next question is, how would the CFPB's proposal to not include medical debts on credit scores affect the industry? Just to add on to that, I know there's so much to do with medical debt. So I guess we could just kind of talk about that in general. So if you guys want to touch on that.
Well, I think it is going to have, I'll tell you what it's really going to have an impact on is the CRAs. I mean, because remember, credit reporting agencies are subscribers of these services. And if you can't credit report, can't pay the monthly fee. I mean, I think it's really going to impact certainly the big three and any of these other kind of smaller entities that are out there. So it's definitely going to have an economic impact from a business standpoint. But I think, I want to take a step back and maybe get a tad philosophical about this. I will try not to be too political about this. Look, we have an underwriting system in this country. We want to lend. That's what financial services do. And we work in what I always say is our ecosystem. And so if people want to borrow money, and really the way to create wealth is to borrow so that you can pay it back and you can get more money. But if you want banks or anybody to loan you money, they got to think whether you're credit worthy enough. And how are they going to do that? Are there problems in our credit reporting system? Absolutely. There is. The processes are, as I just explained before, are very difficult. But I get a little frustrated when we look at this problem from a top down rather than from a bottom up. And that really is what we need to be thinking about. Credit reporting really talks about financial wellness and financial capability. And why aren't we teaching people to be more financially capable? Now, medical debt has its issues that are different a little bit than, say, your regular credit card, because a lot of people don't wake up in the morning and say, ooh, I want to get an MRI, or ooh, I got to go to the emergency room. These are situations that have fallen upon them. And as you know, and all of us have gone to the doctor, 3 months later, you get this thing from your insurance company, which I can't read. And at the end of the day, it says, I owe this money. And then another 3 months happens, and I finally get a bill from my provider that says, after we went through your insurance and after we paid your deductible, blah, 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 you owe me $35. And okay, I'll pay the $35. But it is not a, I would say, good process, and it's not very efficient and it's not quick. So it is wrought with problems, and it is the lowest hanging fruit and the easiest thing for the Bureau and everybody to jump on and say, yeah, we got to fix this. Okay, fine. But I remember when I was on the advisory board many years ago, one of the big topics then was called credit invisibles. What do we do about people who are credit invisible, who have no credit? Because people who have no credit can't get a credit card, can't buy a car, can't, they are disadvantaged among, I would say, the rest of us on this call. Well, if you start removing stuff from credit reports, guess what? Now you have more credit invisibles. Now, I'm not saying the best way to build credit is to go get medical debt and make sure that you pay it. But I think we're going down a very dangerous path if we're going to say medical debt bad, can't report it. As Leslie said, what's next? Student loan bad, can't report it. What's next? Credit card, oh, high interest rates. They marketed you in the wrong way, can't report that. we are going down, in my opinion, a very dangerous path. And we're looking at this the wrong way, because we need to have some sort of mechanism to measure whether someone who's going to come in and want a loan or buy a car or buy a house or whatever is at the right rate, will have the propensity to pay it back, and to help them build wealth and build credit. And that is really important. So we are going through a very interesting time, and it's going to be, we'll see how this all kind of shakes out. But I think these are some of the dangers that are not being thought about as we look at this.
And it's so interesting to hear that response to Ashley's question. My response goes in a completely different direction, of course, and that is, there is no scientific information that says credit reporting or not credit reporting medical debts has any impact on whether people pay them. There's zero. I've never seen a study. I've been practicing law for a few years now, and I've asked for studies. I've heard people say, oh, we need this for the lift, and we need that for the lift, and we need this for the lift. Understand from our prior privilege of participating in one of these, when we talked about Reg F and the prohibition against passive debt collection, which is putting a trade line on a consumer's report, hoping they'll call in and bless you, then lettering them, you know, those days are gone. So the big small balance collection projects where you just put the trade line on and then you sent the collection notice if you actually communicated with the consumer, those days ended, if not sooner, on November 30th last year. So that's off the table. I still haven't seen any empirical evidence about whether that made a difference in people's collections, or how you would even know whether it made a difference, because we're in such a time of flux. Do the increase in interest rates this week announced this week, are they going to improve or unimprove collections? No, I mean, how would we know? I don't know how we would know. So to answer your question, frankly, nobody knows in the medical arena that reporting a medical debt either helps or hurts the underlying creditor. And it begs another question, Ashley, which is, what do we use credit files for now anyway, really? And what the consumer advocates are really concerned about is that these blemishes on credit files prevent people from getting jobs, because a number of jobs do pull credit on people before offering a job. And I've even heard collection agencies argue passionately, yeah, we want someone with a poor credit score because they'll understand the consumer situation better than somebody who has a score in the 800s. I've also, heard people talk about how, we just can't stop doing that because, our clients require it. Well, why are they requiring it? Is this a wake-up call now to say, what is the credit file for? Is it preventing people from getting apartments they can afford? Is it, I have a good friend who is a senior person that Joann interviewed in her podcast, who's with credit builders, and they work with lenders to help credit invisibles build credit. So is it sort of like good witches and bad witches? We have good credit reporting things and bad credit reporting things. So if people don't want to be credit invisibles anymore, they should take out credit and repay it on time, so the original creditor reports that. So is it bad credit then for a collection agency to be credit reporting at all? And I don't know the answer to that. I've heard a lot of discussions about that during the pandemic, and now who knows if we're really coming out. I mean, hopefully we're coming out, but I don't want to jinx it. So I think these are important conversations your listeners should have with their creditor clients, whether they're medical or not. Why are we credit reporting? What do you hope to gain out of it? What evidence should we show you that we're meeting those expectations, or that credit reporting anymore doesn't?
Mm-hmm.
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, I would add to that, Leslie. I mean, credit reporting is a collection tool. Now we can go back and forth and say whether it's the appropriate collection tool.
Mhm.
But I think what is going to be the inflection point here is that most medical debt is small because it's copays or it's after insurance. Now there's big medical bills, and that's I didn't have insurance at all, and I got my appendix out, and now I got a $30,000 bill. That's it. Let's put that aside for a second. But the majority of medical debt is small, and what's better? Getting 10 phone calls, over a course of a month, letters, or communicating, in some way, shape, and form when you don't really want to talk about the fact that you still have a $300 medical bill for maybe a very personal procedure, or putting it on a credit report and then at some point seeing that it's there and knowing that I have to pay it off. Now, I mean, again, the very simplistic explanation, because credit reports on there for a long period of time. To Leslie's point, we don't know what the ultimate impact was, but it was a communication tool. Yes, it should be accurate and it should have integrity and it should be truthful, but it was a communication tool. And in a lot of ways, it was probably the most passive way to communicate with consumers and a less hostile way to do it in some respects, unless you were going to buy a house and you never knew about it. And I understand that knowledge aspect, but it is a communication tool. And, like we have seen in the collection industry over the years, that breakdown of communication is not helpful. It's not helpful to consumers at all. So, time is going to tell, but I think it's a very interesting, be careful what you wish for, in my opinion, area that we're going into right now.
Yeah.
What really stood out to me about the medical part of it is the impact of voluntary versus involuntary medical procedures, and how that's just a blanket statement with medical. And this past week, I actually took my 4-year-old to get stitches, and I feel like that's just a different situation than if you're, getting an elected procedure, and how that could impact it.
Yeah. And I think that, in the New York Times article, there was a quote from one of the board members at ACA, and he was talking about how what nobody's paying attention to, interestingly, is the role that health plans play in this complex world of healthcare transactions and credit reporting. And I'm sure, sadly, you'll see some EOBs and, other things. And it's just, healthcare has gotten so incredibly complex. And for people old as me, you remember when President Clinton wanted his wife to straighten out all of that. And she spent all that time, and she's a very smart person, whether you do or don't agree with her politics. And she could not get through the impasse and the obstacles put in her way by health plans. And I'm not meaning to demonize them, because blessedly they do pay some of our medical bills, not as much as we thought, but whatever. But to Joann's point, EOBs are not, they want us to write collection letters that are understood by humans. Has anyone looked at an EOB? I mean, there's JJ, XX, WWW, there's all these reason codes and explanation codes and, things that they are telling back to the provider, and then the provider tells them to you in a hostile way. And it's gotten to be really unpleasant. If you have to go to your PCP, it's only free wellness visit. If you don't launch off and say, could you renew my prescription for blah, blah, blah? Because as soon as you say that, then it's no longer a wellness. There's all these secret rules, and it reminds me of Halo and some of these games our kids play online, which probably isn't even Halo anymore, where there's these secret rooms and you need the scepter, and then you have to get the emerald, and to get to all those places. And we've made it too complex for people that just want care and treatment. And Joann and I feel very strongly consumers want to pay their bills. It's just not always clear how to do that and whether they really owe that. And, Joann and I work with a lot of CRAs, and the law of large numbers says no matter how vigilant you are, there's some percentage of the time that there will be mistakes. They aren't intentional. There are lots of controls and safeguards and guardrails. And but there still will be some mistakes, and we just need a better system for that to happen. I also wanted to point out one other odd thing. There's some inference that it's better to delete a paid medical debt trade line than just leave it out there and report it as paid. I don't know the credit score implications of that, but the Fair Credit Reporting Act says the only reason you can delete something from someone's credit file is if it's inaccurate or you no longer have access to information about it to assure it is correct. So if I am at a collection agency that does tertiary collections and a quad collectors after me, when the accounts are recalled from me, I have to delete the trade lines because I'm not going to get payment files anymore. So that's pretty clear that that's really what the FCRA says. So now, to Joann's earliest point, we're having conversations about things as though they are the real way the law is meant to be, but it isn't what the law says. And while we had Reg F, nobody's touched Reg V in any kind of appreciable manner in a long time. So maybe Reg V needs some attention.
Yeah.
I don't know, but it's just anybody who's listening to this that is furnishing data, whether it's medical or not, really needs to talk to their clients, as Joann said, view their compliance management system, make sure they have all the policies that Appendix E of Reg V says they should have. And if you are in doubt about what you are doing, or you have any misgivings about the integrity of the data you're getting from any one of your clients, you probably should just say no to data furnishing.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think it's going to hurt a lot of smaller agencies. It's going to become so burdensome that they're not going to credit report. And if that's the goal, okay, fine. But I think you're going to have a lot of people out there who are not going to have access to credit because there's no way to tell what their credit worthiness is. And that, it is an ecosystem, and the ecosystem is being very, very much disrupted right now. It needs to be fixed. There's no doubt. But I think for agencies, we touched on it a little bit. If you're going to credit report, it's not only to have your communication with your client to make sure it's accurate, but you're going to have to do a lot of auditing and a lot of look backs to make sure and see what kind of disputes you're getting, how you are handling it. That kind of reporting is going to be vitally important. And regulators, whether it's state or federal, are going to expect you to have that data. That's non-revenue generating work. It's going to require you to enhance your compliance departments. But if you get a knock on a door from a regulator, that's one of the first questions they're going to ask you. What's your disputes look like for the past 12 months? And what did you do about them? You can't, everybody thinks, okay, I got a dispute. I did a reasonable investigation. I'm done. There's much more to it than that.
Yeah. So that was just like a lot of information. It was great information, but definitely like the people watching have to definitely do their work. But one thing when you guys were talking about, insurance and going through all these hoops, they don't make it easy. It's funny because this actually just happened to me. Earlier this month, I had gotten a bill from a doctor's visit that I went to in the beginning of February. And they sent blood work or whatever to an outside company. And so I got a bill from that outside company, and I was like, what is this from? And I'm like reading the test, and they don't put it in English. It's all in this is what the test is. You have no idea. And I was like, okay, I don't know. Didn't see my insurance anywhere on it. And I was like, okay. So I reached out and I was like, is my insurance on this anywhere? Is this going towards my deductible? Is it what's going on right now? And it took 2 or 3 days for them to actually get back to me to my question. So it is just such a long process, on the consumer side, to be like, okay, now I know what this is for. I'll pay it, whatever. And I actually had a really tough realization because I just got kicked off my parents' plan last year, and it was all covered, didn't have to pay anything, so great. And now I'm getting these bills for going to doctor's visits and stuff. So even consumers who may have switched their insurance plan or, stuff like that, where they just don't understand what they're paying for, is I could see why that's a huge deal in dealing with that.
Mhm.
And I'm impressed that you're talking about meeting your deductible and whether something counts toward your deductible. I mean,
Mhm.
I think that that's just not something the average American talked about, maybe even 5 years ago, but for sure not 10 years ago, that, we have to be experts in these things. And there was a day where you thought, okay, I'm going to pay down so I have the lowest deductible possible. But to your point, what if your physician picked a lab that he likes well or she likes well, and it's out of network, but you didn't know what lab was being picked? I've heard conversations with physicians where they're like, yeah, I know so-and-so is in network, but they take forever. They have a high error rate, blah, 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 whatever are the reasons. And these guys I can call right now and they'll take you right in. And I mean, we're assuming no kickbacks and whatever, but it's so many, it's a dizzying array of choices. And Brittany, you're going to have to take your son for follow-up visit too. I mean, it never ends. And you want to be vigilant. You want to make sure that you do preventive care and do all those things. And, in this pandemic influenced world, people are talking about wellness, your financial wellness, your mindfulness, your, things we never talked about before. Well, how do you get those, And I think these are some really interesting, I'll get off my soapbox now. These are just some interesting things I think about a lot. And I think about collection agencies. And Joann and I have heard some astounding statistics about the sheer number of collection agencies that don't exist anymore post-pandemic. Every major trade association has seen a material diminution in its membership. And people say, oh, well, that just means that there's a lot of merger and acquisition activity, and it must mean that there are now fewer but bigger agencies. It doesn't mean that either. So, it raises all these pressures on how collection agencies operate. Goes back to whether we think, do they confer a value for Main Street business, large business, healthcare businesses, lenders, telco companies? What is this all going to mean, in the long run for the future of the industry?
I guess even overall, we're just going to really have to keep an eye on this. Things I'm sure are going to keep changing and coming in. Is there any advice you guys have for collection agencies right now to help prepare for credit reporting procedures to be compliant?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that we have, I think that the industry has somewhat forgotten about, and this has been, this is something the Bureau, when it first was stood up, was very clear about. You have to have a compliance management system. We have kind of backed away from that over the last couple of years, but you have, and I don't care what size agency you are, and it's going to be harder for small agencies because they just don't have the bandwidth and the human capital to do it. But you have to have a highest governing body, whoever that may be, whether it's a board of directors. Most agencies are small mom and pops. Of course, they don't have a board of directors, but you're going to need some sort of governing body, 1, 2, 3 people that are the ones that you go up to, who make the decisions and are the voice of the industry, of the business, excuse me. You need really good policies, procedures. You need training and you need auditing. Those are the 4 components. And unfortunately, everyone's like, oh, I got policies and procedures. Great. Do you utilize them, or are they stuck on a shelf? Are you making sure that everybody is following the policies and procedures? Are you training and monitoring your folks to make sure they are following your policies and procedures? And more importantly, are you auditing? And in the audit process, are you tracking and trending? So if you're auditing somebody, or a process and you see that the process is not working, what are you doing about it? Are you remediating? Or is it, you can't just say 1 month, oh, this didn't work. Let's see what happens next month. Next month, oh, this didn't work. Let's see what happens. All of a sudden you have 6 months of an issue that has not been addressed. That's the expectation of every state and federal regulator. And unfortunately, this is what banks have been doing for years. Banks have had compliance committees and departments and risk assessments, and sure, they have the resources to do it. But the expectation is no matter what size you are in the financial services industry, and regardless of whether you're a depository institution or not, you have to have that infrastructure. And that industry has not done that is a problem. So if you're going to credit report, you better make sure that your Reg B policies are good in the sense that you are making sure that the information that you are receiving from your client is accurate and it has integrity, that you're reporting accurately, that you're addressing disputes, every dispute. Just because someone keeps writing to you every month saying, not me, not me, not me, and after the 3rd month, you're like, well, this is duplicate, I'm not going to deal with it. No, that's not what Reg F says, that's not what Reg FCRA says, and it's not what Reg B says. You have to, unfortunately, deal with this. And, people do take advantage of that process. So if you want a credit report, you must do that. It's not an if, it's a must. So.
Yeah, I think that this whole dispute management, making things transparent to consumers, having a dispute place on your website where the consumer can click, do you want to dispute? Click and have a drop-down menu, and maybe it gives you reasons that align with the Metro 2 dispute codes, and then maybe suggest a piece of paper to upload that would support the dispute, something that makes it really easy for a consumer not only to dispute, but to tell you the reason for their dispute. I think a lot of consumers dispute, but we don't always know the basis of their disputes. And so in order for us to be able to conduct a reasonable investigation, how about we make the front end process of doing disputes? And I'm hearing in the industry, and maybe this is folklore or whatever, that there are a number of vendors that are building some of these tools. But if I had a magic wand, I would say, get one of these tools, build one of these tools, turn it on 24/7, because if I think there's a mistake on my credit file and it's easy for me to follow a workflow to tell you about it, it benefits the consumer and it benefits the data furnisher. And I think that would be a huge, not that everybody is going to go online, but, even consumers that don't have the ability to go online might have family members that could go online for them or some third party helping them, but making it easy. Like Ashley and Brittany, if you get your bills and they don't seem right, wouldn't you like a quick way? I mean, you're busy working people. Wouldn't you want a quick way on your own time frame where you don't have to interact with a person that you could share that dispute? And I think that, I don't know why we wouldn't try to do that, to ease the consumer's load in this uncertain time. My understanding this morning from some of the CRAs is that they are scrambling. They're going to put out some industry FAQs, and maybe by the time you air this, they'll be out. But I would also recommend, Brittany, to your question, keep your ears and eyes open. There's a lot going on here. There's clearly a well-organized focus on credit reporting. And read Joann and I had a conversation with an industry expert yesterday, and I said, well, look at all these breadcrumbs the regulators are dropping for us. And he said, it's more like cheesecakes falling out of the sky and hitting you in the head, and it is. And take these things seriously. Remember that regulators don't have a lot of resource. So if they're picking this and they're seeding all these stories and these different approaches, it means something. It means something.
Yeah, I liked that you said just like making it easy, like the consumer can just go here, do this, understand it easy. And I feel like that just ties in general with everything going on in the industry, where it is starting to be more consumer focused and having all of these laws and regulations to protect the consumer. It sounds and feels like credit reporting is kind of going to be just like that, where, well, kind of tying it into like consumers, they don't want to get a phone call, they want to get a text. Same thing with credit reporting. They don't want to call someone and have to dispute this and go through all these hoops. Having something like you said on a website that they can just go to and easily do it, sounds like that it's kind of got to move that way, just like everything else is.
I would use the Amazon philosophy. It should be as easy to dispute your credit report as it is to return something on Amazon. I mean, I've never talked to anybody at Amazon. Have you?
No.
Ever? And my, the thing that I ordered that it doesn't fit, went back, and my credit card got debited within 3 to 5 days. I got a couple emails about it. So we need to be looking at this as almost like commerce. And it seems like we can do commerce really well electronically. I don't know why we can't do this really well electronically. So.
Yeah. Well, you guys, that is all the questions we have for you. And I'm going to be honest, this is probably one of the longest episodes that I've done. And all of the information has been amazing. I learned stuff, like we told you before we started filming, we're not really too familiar with credit reporting. And now I feel like I've definitely learned a lot on it. And all of the recommendations that you guys gave for collection agencies to do right now are definitely things that they can do right now, and get on that. So I really appreciate you guys coming back on an episode with us. You are always amazing to work with. So thank you guys again.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
You too.
Take care.
Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.